Behind the Shades.
Kevin, actually, I didn't even ask you the time zone. Good morning, afternoon, and evening where you are. How are things?
I am living the dream. I am in EST as well, so it is the same time for me as it is for you, but I'm excited to chat. I appreciate you having me on, my friend.
Perfect. So I do appreciate you having here. I think in our green room, I saw a couple of tattoos there. Do they mean anything?
Yeah, so when I was 16, I got the typical barbed wire tattoo. My mom took me to a place and I got a tattoo in somebody's basement. So that usually isn't the highest quality tattoo you can get. So I ended up covering that up with a rose coming through the pavement. And then it's hard to see this one, but I didn't know my dad. So I have a tattoo on my arm, kind of part of the sleeve, where it's a young boy where he would be holding a man's hand, but it kind of disappears where the hands should connect. And that was just kind of a representation of, I didn't know my dad. I didn't really meet my dad until I was 27. So the bond that I was supposed to have with him, I never did. And I wanted to, I don't want to say commemorate that, but I don't ever want to forget that. I think that's what's made me who I am today. And it's always important to remember that.
I would say that's amazing because I grew up without my mother and my father early on, and I have 4 tattoos. And sometimes what I thought about getting or continuing it is that you realize how much of an impact that has on you, not knowing your parents. I don't know if it was like that for you, Kevin, but for me, it just seemed like I saw families everywhere I went. Is that the same experience for you?
Yeah, it's interesting how I was very blessed to have really good friends who had really good families. And it's like they always kind of wanted to adopt me into their family, and we would have dinner over there and I'd stay over their house all the time. So I did get a family experience, or I guess maybe you'd say a normal, typical family experience from that. But yeah, I remember it was first grade, second grade, where you would go and the first day of school, you would go around the class and people would say, "What does your mom do for work? What does your dad do for work?" And I was like, construction. My dad does construction. I don't know. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you, but I assume it's construction. So yeah, I definitely had a very similar experience with that.
I was telling people something similar. I was telling everyone they're in management. And here, years later, I'm in management. But I don't have any kids, like really, not that I'm repeating like the generational curse, as they'll call it, right?
Of course.
So before we get right into it, because I know you want to express and share a lot of your journey, like we just did, as well as help those who want to get into maybe this space that you and I are doing, or maybe just focus on life. So why don't you officially let everyone know who you are, where they can find you, and a little bit more positive news about yourself when we started off there, right?
I appreciate it. My name is Kevin Palmieri. I am the CFO, the founder, and the host of Next Level University. It is a global top 100 podcast with 1,320 something episodes, listeners in 150 plus countries. And it's what we do every day. We do an episode every single day to help people level up their life, their love, their health, and their wealth. So you can just search Next Level University and you'll find us. At the end of the day, Terrain, I'm just a human who wants to impact other humans. And, I had my own rock bottom moments. I had my own rock bottom basement moments, but those are the things that really taught me how to be who I am today. And I think that self-improvement is something that has impacted me in so many positive ways. And I'm trying to help people understand why they are the way they are today. Why you are the way you are today is not what you did yesterday, most likely. It's most likely to what we were just speaking of, maybe the way you were raised, maybe the household you were brought up in, the energy, the toxicity. So I'm really trying to help people become aware of that and then use that awareness as power.
I'm one person that I found that in my life, I learned a lot more from falling down than I ever did from getting back up and walking.
Yes.
It took me a long time to understand that to run, you have to walk, and to walk, you have to fall. Instead of me looking at everyone else and saying that, hey, you're making $1 million from doing this. Me. I want to get into that as well. That's what started my journey, just understanding that my race is different than Kevin's race, and Kevin's race is different than our listeners today. So if someone wanted to understand what got you to where you were. Let's start at the beginning. What was the motivation to start this and to continue forward?
Yeah, I had graduated high school, realized I didn't want to go to college, and then I just did a bunch of odd jobs, right? I was a forklift operator. I cleaned bathrooms in a hospital. I was on-call firefighter for a short time, personal trainer. I did many, many, many different things. And I ended up getting this very unique job opportunity in an industry called weatherization. So all that means is my company would go into large state-owned buildings, usually schools or government-owned buildings, depending. And it was our job to make those buildings more energy efficient. And I went from making like $15 an hour at one of my jobs to getting paid $120 an hour at this job. And I was thinking to myself, this is it. This is amazing. This is the best thing ever. This is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I ended up making $100,000 a couple of years later. And when I got to the end of that year, I expected to feel drastically different. When I opened that final pay stub, I thought I was going to feel confident. I thought I was going to feel certain. I thought I was going to feel secure. I didn't feel any of those things. So I realized that for most of my life, and especially that year, I had lived unconsciously. I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing. I was just kind of winging it, hoping for the best. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So shortly thereafter, I was interviewed on a YouTube channel about health and fitness and mindset. After that interview ended, I said, imagine if you could do that for a living. And one of my friends said, you can. I mean, there's people out there that do it. So I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast shortly thereafter. And I was just having conversations, much like you and I are having, deep thoughts, deep feelings, deep emotions. What are your dreams? What are your goals? If you could do anything in the world, what would it be? I loved those conversations. But at that point, that was not paying the bills. So I was still doing this job, and something shifted for me, Terrain, where when I made the money and realized I was not willing to do what I did to make that money again, because that money did not bring me what I thought it would, I fell out of love with my job as I fell in love with podcasting. So it ended up getting to the end of that year. I was podcasting on the side. I'm working full time. I'm traveling all over the place for work. And I ended up having a really tough day, a really tough morning where I was sitting on the edge of a hotel bed contemplating suicide because I was just so out of alignment. I was so miserable. I was depressed. I was anxious. I felt stuck. I was afraid to start over. And then I ended up leaving that job 3 or 4 months later and going all in on what we're doing today. And honestly, the reason I continued doing it, and this was our conversation behind the scenes, it's not about the money, it's about the impact, right? When people reach out and say, hey, this episode makes me think differently, or because of you, I left a toxic relationship, that's what it's all about. There's no amount of money that can replicate that feeling. Obviously, money is great, it's necessary, but I think the fulfillment that I get from this is also way more necessary than I ever really understood. And I will never, ever, ever stop this, no matter how hard it gets. You know, this is the mission, this is the goal, and this is what we're playing for.